Are you ready?
There, it's all recorded. This is Nothing Media Talks. I'm with Richard E. Trevino, and he's the author of The Conjured Self, and he's a very, very good writer. And hello, Richard. uh,
Hello there.
I have a lot of questions, and the first thing that came to mind is for you or for your action figure, whatever, or conjured self, what is the meaning of life?
The meaning of life has no meaning to begin with. There is no meaning to life because life does not require meaning.
Hmm, that's a very um that's
To
how
appear as it does. Yeah.
yeah.
Apparently. Apparently.
Yeah, you were talking about I was reading your website about the conjured self, and for a lot of listeners or viewers, what
It's not
is
my
this?
website.
Yeah.
It's nobody's website.
What is
Sorry.
this conjured self? What is the conjured self?
Uh, the Conjured Self placed a disclaimer on the website. So those other conjured selves that still think they're separate conjured selves, they can go there because this conjured self catered to other conjured selves.
Hmm.
Now, this conjured self no longer uses pronouns like two by four, from, about, with, upon, around, between, before, after, even with distances here, there, everywhere, north, south, east, west directions. It no longer expresses that way. And so it's going to be in the expression as energy is free. It's an energetic movement, it's free energy. That is the absolute. That is Brahman. Now, it's not a particular type of Brahman because, in the traditional sense, in the Upanishads, there's about 108 of them. You take your pick, and they do. Who takes a pick? Nobody. It just goes on and on like that with the paradoxes. But and then to address questions, to address a question in a satsang, the answer is not always concisely a specific answer because there are innumerable answers, just as there are innumerable questions. There are no parameters, boundaries to anything. Everything is timeless, boundless. So if we're going to get to a specific question, and then it's going to automatically be what's called negated. It's going to be knocked down by the Neo-Advaitin. I say Neo-Advaitin, in a traditional sense, that means the guru. Same thing. Apparently appeared to be a different timeline, modern times, as it could be expressed and has been. And in terms of going off on other all types of subjects, we can't really focus on any particular subject unless the question is out there. If the question is addressed, then it can be addressed in one of innumerable ways. This is why the spontaneity apparently appears to be with the satsang, where one, more, or several, what apparently appears to be more than one, because there is no separation. One without a second of anything. And even in time, one moment without the next second, minute, hour. No continuum, no continuation. There is no beginning, there is no end, the alpha and omega. Let's let that rest a little bit, that energy right there. And on with the next question. If you feel,
Yeah.
if it arrives, and apparently appears to arrive in what? The mind that we think is our own mind. Now, we can't just say that there is no body. In a sense, there is no body subjectively and objectively. This is true. Yet the manifestation of the human corporeal appearance is still appearing. But that's all it is. It's just an appearance of a human form. Now, is it a particular type of human form? Apparently appears. Yes, apparently. Do we need to focus on that? No, because there's no separation. So there's no unique, terminally unique, separate individual counter self.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. I was there's a question that arises, like I noticed that people in the non-duality uh, whatever that is like they say there's no causality, but from the vantage point of this conjured self, Leonard, I see the pattern of it starts with trauma and then it starts with or whatever pain. Then they search for the answer to the solution, and then they go to like maybe different, maybe I don't know how to call it, healing or what, and the seeking, the searching for answers, and then like I see that there's a cost to the dropping of the self, the dropping of the separate self or whatever it.
There is a collapse.
Yeah, the
Okay, there's
like
a
there's
falling away,
yeah.
collapse, falling away. That never ends, by the way, because you can't just say there is a unique, separate collapse happening, a final collapse. There are no finalities to anything. Nothing is final. Everything is continuation. Everything is ing, energetic. Everything is no thinging, as no thing is everythinging. See, the non-duality message of Advaita Vedanta now, we're going to say the Neo-Advaita now, because it's the same thing as the guru of in the traditional sense from India, with the first ashram when that was set up. The first ashram is very similar to the satsang setting on the Zoom. It just appears differently, and it's appearing modern, what is referred to as modern. And then there's the English language. But in a traditional sense, the original tongues, the original resonance, if you will, of this message of non-duality was uttered using the Sanskrit. Okay, so there's a Sanskrit and there's the Hindi language, and then the scribed Sanskrit, right to left. So it's not important the direction, and it's not. There's no specific importance to anything really, but in terms of appealing to the conjured self that has never heard this message, it is going to require as much time, although there is no time. It just seems to be time. Apparently, appears to be time in space and time, and not of space and time. But the conjured self lives in a dream that it only focuses on in time. It doesn't understand not of time because it doesn't recognize that. It's still constricted. It's still self-identifying with its conjured self.
I
Hmm.
see. I was that's in my mind right now. I
Who's
was
mine? Who's mine?
this conjured self.
Oh no, no, you said my. See,
Yeah.
you'll notice that. Now, I'm not saying who's going to notice that. Who's going to notice when the my drops, the collapse, and the falling away? Who's going to notice when it's no longer saying me, mine, and even in groups, in agreement, ours, you and I, them, us, all those pronouns that are associated with what? Separation. So you see the natural expression changes, and it can never go back to speaking the same way.
I see.
It even tries to fool itself to try to do it again, but it can't. It's trying to think because it's not really doing it. See, it thinks in terms of doing and knowing all the time. The conjured self does this because it has yet to collapse. It's suspended, and in that suspension is an energetic suspension that is likened to the double slit experiment.
Mhm.
Is there an observer yet that distorts and causes the wave pattern? Yes, that's that conjured self that interferes with what already is and is not the absolute. So the conjured self, just by simply observing, it's going to begin to criticize and critique and judge what it sees, and then it's going to give it a name, a label. It's going to call it something. It's going because that's all it knows. It's not its fault. It's not right or wrong either. It's not nothing is absolutely right and nothing is absolutely wrong.
Yeah. I was the thing I The question in right that
Ah, sorry, my missus. She just got back from work. She works a night shift. Sorry for the
no, it's
interruption.
okay. That's fine.
Yeah, go ahead.
The question that arises right now is like how different is this? How different is Richard before? Because no matter what uh label we do, some people still call it the shift or the falling away. How different is life before the falling away and after it fell away for you?
It recognizes there are no differentials.
Ah,
There are no such thing as differences. It recognizes that there is no difference anymore. There is no contradiction. There is no problem. Oh, by the way, you're going to hear the combination of metaphysics and science and non-duality. There's already a science and non-duality conference going on, seemingly, apparently. Okay, there isn't anything really going on. Nothing's really happening. See, the self-contract self looks out in the world, and then it thinks in terms of separate things. I'll give you an example: separate items. It still believes it has its own body, it's living its own life, and it has its own hands and all that sort of thing, and then it's making its own decision. This is one that it has the toughest time, in a sense, dropping or falling away. It's not doing the dropping. It's just either going to apparently appear to happen or it won't. And then the action figure, the body mind, the conjured self, will either notice it or it won't. But it's not really a noticeability. It's so subtle that it begins to express in terms of its its experiencing via the five sense modalities: seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling. That's the energetic movement of the conjured self anyway. Seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling. The only difference is if it believes in its own special brand of seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling. It says, I am a separate seer, I'm a separate doer, I'm a separate knower. See, that's that constriction that's described. So, if, let's say, it's walking in the park, okay? So it's going to say, I'm walking in the park, and it is also going to identify with its birth certificate. See, the birth certificate represents the beginning of a separate person being born. So that separate person thinks in terms of ownership, it thinks in terms of proclamations, it thinks in terms of, well, that's my toy. But the parental figure that tells me what to do, my little brother, little sister, she tells me to share the toy. But that's my toy. I won't. I don't want to share my toy because I'm identifying now that that's my toy. You see, before that, that wasn't happening. The seemingly so appearance of the infant, yes, it is still going like this at some point in space and time. Although it's not of space and time, nobody, nobody is in space and time. It only apparently appears to be that way since that is considered what has been referred to as a dream. And the dream realm, in traditional sense, is Maya. And Maya is the illusion, is the innumerable illusions. More than one illusions. Now there's innumerable illusions. The
yes.
countenance is measurable. We say more than one, but yet, see, it appears as though it's more than one. Why? Remember. Who says to remember? But that's not what we're trying to do here. What are we trying to do anything here? Not necessarily. We're simply sharing what apparently appears to happen when the shift, or you could call it a shift, you could call it a falling away, you could call it a, yeah, you could call it a recognition.
Mm.
Some conjure cells say recognition, but the conjure cell still goes on.
Mhm.
The only difference is it is no longer self-identifying itself with particulars or separate things that it views. It picks up a cup and it recognizes that's a cup. That's everything cupping.
Mhm.
See, absolute cupping. Everything that you used to think was a separate item is not. It's immersed, it's coalesced, it's likened to a glass of milk. Can the milky substance be separated from the liquid? No. This is a way to appeal to the conjured self so that it can recognize that it is not separate. Just as the milky substance and the fluid that then is identified as milk, see, that could be the same situation, apparently appearing the same situation, whereby you may have other types of liquids that may have some type of substance. But the substance and the liquid is very similar to the ocean, the salt in the oceans, and likened to a drop in the ocean. Can you take a glass of ocean and say, I have the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean in this glass now because I dipped it into the sea. So by using these metaphors and these analogies in terms of these analogies in terms of appealing to the conscious self that has yet to apparently appear to collapse and fall away. It's still suspended in that way of thinking of a self. It's a center, the constricted self. The self-identification with itself. In other words, there's many ways to say that.
Yeah.
Hello, Rabbit. Hi. How was your night? Was it all right? My missus, she works nights and yeah, and anyway, so what I was simply going with here and just sharing is that there's more than one way. There always will be. There are innumerable ways with everything, and I'll tell you why. Why is that? Why does it apparently appear to be the case? It's because everything is always always. It's not in some particular way that the conjured self thinks it is. It thinks in permanence. It thinks in terms of self-identification. That's still apparently appearing to happen. Collapse has yet to apparently appear to happen.
Okay.
Whereby it's going to say, well, you know what I did the other day? I woke up the other day. I got out of my bed and I went over because I'm living in my house, and I went over to the sink and I splashed water on my face. So it's always going to be with the mind, the ownership, the minus. It has yet to collapse a bit. Okay. Now, some say they try to describe it, put it into words. It's simply because they have yet to recognize the falling away has yet to continue. A little bit more, a little bit more. But in time, just as it took for the conditioning to learn when it was a baby and started to think of my toys, my hands, my body, my parents, you know, the individuality, the self identification with itself. And then, of course, the real big obvious enforcer, the great obvious enforcer is the birth certificate. That's the one. That is the one right there that still reinforces the suspension and preventing the collapse, so to speak. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's just what apparently appears to have.
Is it preventing to collapse, or it's just the way it is?
In a sense, it is, and I'll give you. It's just like the double slit experiment. If there's no observer, then that particle is just going to continue behaving in a particular way. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not until the observer is measuring and is looking at what's happening with the particle going through slits and then a wave pattern collapses. It's the same thing that's happening with the constriction or preventing the collapse and the falling away from appearing to happen. Until that does apparently appear to happen, then the conjured self is going to continue with identifying with itself and continue to express with me, mine, myself. Now, as I said, as this action figure, I saw, as a conjured self says, and Although the conjured self says that, it no longer believes in, well, I said it. It's not going to say that anymore because it doesn't recognize that anymore. I'm not saying anything. Why? Because it's not self identifying with the apparent appearance of the body, right? The body mind, it's no longer it's no longer self identifying with the I. It's just saying and recognizing now that it apparently appears as though there's an action figure that had a birth name and birthright and a birth certificate, but it wasn't really born. It what apparently appeared to have been born was the conjured self. See, the conjured self is what apparently appears to be born, not the appearance of the baby,
Hmm.
and not what is thought to be and believed. So it's all in the learning. After so much habit, so many habits that it, and there are innumerable habits. See, it's always, but to break that down is very, very difficult for the conjured self to comprehend because it's too steeped in self identification with itself. It has learned all this, it's been exposed to it, it's in space and time now, apparently. Apparently appears to be in space and time. However, it never was. It never was. It was always not of space and time, see, from nowhere, from nothing, from no thing, manifesting temporally temporary, not permanently, not exclusively so, but also not so. See? From nowhere, out of nothing, the void. It's been called all types of things. And there are no black holes, by the way, and the physicist is going to say, oh, there's a theory to everything. And then you're going to see some, um, let's say maybe as an example, an ex NASA physicist, and he's going to write a 3-part series books and call it My Big Toe, My Big Theory of Everything. Then he's going to say that I can measure the universe because I'm going to tell you how I know. See, there it is. I, you see, he's self-identifying that he was an ex-NASA physicist and he's writing books and saying, "This is my book because I put my name on it." Well, wait a minute. You know, remember regarding the self-identification with a birth certificate, all conjured selves apparently appear to have really. Well, was it the conjured self's decision to name itself? First of all, no, it wasn't. Other conjured selves did. So you see how the separation was perpetuated. It was perpetuated in that way. Now there are innumerable ways to continue going on and on and on, and the the recognition and awareness reaches a point of where it recognizes it will never have an end. There will always be questions, always be questions. Now you hear in non-duality circles these days with the neo-advaitins, they say the speaker, the non-duality speaker, says that although there's no separation, it apparently appears to be the action figure continuing on. The selfing continues to happen. It apparently appears as though there is an appearance of a separate person, but it's not really separate. Not subjectively and objectively. It just simply is and is not. See, it's apparently appearing, okay, in space and time, but it's not of space and time. It's always. It's that which is nothing from nowhere, and it is also temporally in time, temporarily for an indeterminate duration in space and time, manifesting and appearing. It apparently appears that way since nothing begins and nothing ends. There is no beginning to anything, and there is no end to anything. There is no beginning to nothing, and there is no end to nothing. And see, it's the paradoxical situation that will always apparently appear to be a paradox, just like that. The alpha and omega. Yeah, the absolute. Take your pick. You can call it anything you want in any language.
Yeah. like
Yeah.
like there are five senses. What about the sixth or the psychic senses, the angels, the ETs, the other.
Conjuring, more conjuring. The
Mhm.
conjurer self is in a habit of conjuring something else because the conjurer self is going to go and say and think in terms of, wait a minute, I'm thinking that that can't be it. See, I have certain beliefs. I have, see, it's still suspended. It hasn't fallen away. It hasn't collapsed at all. It's suspended. And sometimes if you try to measure it, you can't really measure the collapse. It's immeasurable. Yeah, because everything's immeasurable. So a measurement, the scientist takes a measurement. That's why the double slit experiment, they call it it's similar to the problem, the hard problem. You'll hear that phrase, the hard problem, with the metaphysician that's trying to figure out, does thinking happen in the brain, or is it consciousness that's being tapped into, or is the consciousness generated from the brain? And they're calling that the hard problem. It's neither. You know why? Because there is no problem. There never was a problem to the absolute. The absolute appearing is no problem. It just apparently appears to be the infinite appearing finitely. And that which is finite is, going back to traditional sense, the Maya. The Maya. And then all innumerable delusions, and it caters to what? It caters to the conjure self. It doesn't want it to collapse. In a sense, that's the whole purpose of the idea of Maya.
So the Maya
In the
is.
first, second, third, and all places, Maya is the dream.
Mhm.
Maya is appearing as the absolute that is infinitudinal complexification. That's infinity appearing finitely. So the Maya, an illusion, and the dream is finiteness. That which is apparent appearing as though it's final or it's real or it's particularly real, observable, knowable, doable. All the ables. In other words, that which is thought to be permanently so, and the conscious self always leaves out the not so. And that which is observable, it leaves out the unobservable. That which is knowable, it leaves out the unknowable. See, it leaves it out, it singles it out because it's still thinking in separation. It's still thinking in terminal uniqueness. It's still thinking with all the pronouns I, me, to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, around, before, and after. That doesn't have to be, recited and not like the mantras. That's, in a sense, what's happening, apparently appearing to happen. To, by, for, from, about, with, upon, around, before, and after the conscious self that's still thinking in terms of mine. This is my idea. I came up with it. Now I'm going to write a book about it because I'm going to put my birth name on there. See, it's still thinking in terms of self identification with itself, that its name is what it is. In other words, I'm no different than a separate named plastic cup. Maybe you're going to say this is a plastic cup when everything and no thing is apparently appearing to be cupping. So it's everything cupping. There are there are uh, there are other neo-Advaitins out there stating that in a similar way, but that's not the only particular single separate way to say anything. So even in the language of any language, statements that are said can be said in innumerable ways, not just one particular way or some other way, innumerable ways. Why? Always, always. The absolute is always, always. Everything and no thing, and separately so and not so, ad infinitum. Alpha and Omega, no end. There's never was, because there never was a beginning, and there's never going to be an end. To what? The absolute. This is another way of putting it. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I was just
That's it.
sorry.
That's
My
it.
phone is.
Don't apologize. See, the action figure, the conjure self says, I'm sorry, you're not interrupting anything because this isn't really happening. Yeah, that too. This interview's not even happening. You're not sitting there and I'm not sitting here. Although you identify with the birth name, birthright of Leonard, the forename, the first name, this is Richard, you know, and oh yeah, I'm very special. I have a birthday and birthright. I have a birth certificate. That's how I identify. See, the conjured self does that. Conjured self thinks in terms of mine. That's my birth certificate. I know who I am. I know I was born. I know who my parents are. Yeah, don't try to tell me any different. See, it's so strongly entrenched in this idea of terminal uniqueness
Mm.
and self identity. It cannot help itself, just as self cannot get out of self. You see, it's already apparently appearing as though it's a trap. It appears as though it's a trap, but it really isn't. It's going to go on. It, although even the apparent appearance of the collapse continues, that separate sense of self is still going on. You know how? It latches on. There's a mental thought system. Okay, it's like consciousness, likened to consciousness, but it's called consciousness. But it really is all there is not just consciousness. See, they want to make it into a problem, thinking that it needs to be solved. That's with the scientist, the metaphysician, and the science of non-duality. They're it almost apparently appears as though they're choosing sides. Either you go with the scientific model or you don't. It's just simply the language of science. So there's various languages, various expressions, but they're not separate. They're all together. It's just like the glass of milk. I mentioned about the
Mhm.
glass of milk before. It is likened to light and darkness. Is there a seam? Is there a dividing line between light and darkness? Doesn't apparently appear to be one. Can we put one in there? Can we take light and darkness? Can we draw a line? Can we use an object to separate light and darkness? Impossible. No. So it never was like that. See? There is no separation. There never was any separation. One without a second. Here's another one. There's so many. There's so many what's referred to as Zen. Zen quotes. Zen quotes such as whatever can be perceived is not what's being perceiving. Whatever could be perceived is not what's perceiving. There are no separate perceptions of anything. So the moment that a separate perceiver believes, see, there it is, thinking and the believing. It believes in its own self. It believes it's self-convinced. It's constantly conjuring the idea of separation, constantly conjuring the idea of mine and yours. So in agreement, it believes it is seeing other separate conjured selves out in a world, in a society, and that's all subjective and objective. That too drops. Thinking in terms of I'm here and the world is out there. No, it's both. It is and it is not. We are and we are not. You can't just leave the are not bit out. That part that apparently appears to be a part. Everything is and is not. You can't just say everything just is. It is simply this. Well, it's simply this and it's simply not this. It's this and not this. It's observable and it's also unobservable. It's real, feels tangible, especially the conscious self that has yet collapsed, fallen away. It sticks with its own sensation. In other words, it says, I'm feeling. That's me doing it. The me. See, the me, I feel. No, there's just feelings. You could take all five sensory modalities of the conjured self and use them the same way. Is there a separate smeller? No, there's just the activity of smelling. Is there a separate seer that sees with eyes of its own? No, there's just the act of seeing. Continue to begin to notice that. And guess what? Apparently appears to happen to collapse. It starts right there. Because the conjured self is struggling. It's always going to fight this. It doesn't want to know this. It wants to think in terms of, well, I'm making a decision not to believe in what is being said here. See, it's going to think in terms of that. It cannot stand this message. It doesn't want to have anything to do with this message. So guess what it does? It mocks it. It says, ah, oh, All those people talking about non-duality over there, they're freaking insane. They're nuts. They should be locked up. They do seriously. They really think that way. Or we can look at it comically. It is, and you could go around Facebook right now, and you can find places that are in terms of there's the comically enlightened or the comical Buddha, and you see, so you could take it comically as a cosmic joke. Well, who's taking it anyway in the first place? See, so then the self inquiry steps in and remind it almost as a reminder that you're not separate. Nobody is. Remember, and so you don't have to have a like a book or anything like that written to recognize this. It's spontaneous. It's immediate. In fact, it is faster than anything else. It's faster than the idea of the self-conscious self that tries to interfere. It's faster than that because it's similar to how long it takes scientifically for sunlight to reach the Earth. It's a matter of minutes, isn't it? And similarly, as examples, the neurons that we call neurons in a mind, in a brain that we call a brain, see, there's consciousness, and it just goes on and on and on like that, simply because the conscious self believes in exclusivities. The conscious self is strictly focusing on exclusivities and particulars. It doesn't recognize everything and no thing, all of it, always, always. No, no beginning, no end. It continues, never ends. No. They're too focused on believing and thinking that I'm a separate believer, I'm a separate knower, I'm a separate doer. I need to perpetuate that because that's what I believe in. See? And with a philosophy, that should be changed. Does it have to be? No. But think in terms of thinking, is there a separate thinker? No, there's just thinking. And there's that famous philosophy that states like this: I think, therefore I am. Mm, that was a really strong one. So many conscious souls were in agreement with that one. Not anymore. No, not with everything that is both real and unreal, observable and observable, knowable and unknowable, all together, always, always. Now, you can't just say, I think, therefore I am. Well, who is the I? See? Goes back to that. Whom is the I that thinks it's thinking that it is I am? Oh, see? Catch it right there. Yes. I think? No. Are there separate thinkers thinking? No, it apparently appears that way, but it really isn't. See? So if I think, therefore I am, that means I exist because I think and I believe. No. See? There is no I. There is no me. There is no separate you. There is no separate. See? The subjectivity and objectivity right there. So does that make that, is that to point to the philosophy to call that and say, well, that's wrong, that's error? No, it's not to say it's error. It's just appeared to be a philosophy that was conjured by what? Another conjured self that thought it was separate from everything. See? And it just goes on and on and on like that. What's applicable? There's nothing applicable. However, you'll start noticing the applications of the conjured self that used to think in terms of separation can no longer, it can no longer continue that way, saying that well, I noticed this the other day, or I noticed that. It's not speaking that way anymore. It's not expressing that way anymore. It's simply expressing in terms of, and there is no specific special language in any language, English, French, German, any other language on the entire planet. And one of the languages most spoken, I believe, is Cantonese. Cantonese is one of those most commonly spoken languages next to English. And so, what's in a language? Are there separate speakers speaking a language? No, there's just a language. There's just expressions, expressionings. Always ing, it's energy, constantly free, no parameters, no boundaries to the energetic movements of expression. Why? Why is that? See, the conscious self always wants to know a why and a how. See, because it's going to go on and on like that. It's going to continue to have more questions. That's what it apparently appears to be. After every truth, there are 2 or 3 extra questions behind that. Why does that seem to be that way? Because it's never ending. That's why. It's a never ending story. for the conjured self, just like the movie, the flying puppy. What is it? Dragon puppy. It has a head of a puppy, right, and it has a body of a dragon. But no, I don't know if you ever seen that movie, Leonard. See, movies are still watched. There's nothing wrong with that. We can still say, well, yeah, I can remember when this conjured self actually saw certain movies and has a very good memory. It might have a photographic memory, it might not. But the point is, there are innumerable stories to tell. Every conjured self has a story to tell, especially if it's still thinking in terms of the constriction of a separate sense of self. Yeah, I could give you the story of my life. I can write a book about my life, my life, and then I'm going to put my name on it because I have a birth name and birthright. I have a birth certificate. Oh, by the way, I know I'm going to end too. I'm going to die because I have a death certificate that someone's going to write up. That somebody else is going to write up. See, it's always in that separation, thinking that I had a beginning when I was born and I'll have an ending when I die. There is no birth and there's no death of anything. That's why you may hear other non-duality speakers speak in terms of there's nothing's ever born, nobody's ever born, and nobody ever dies. Yes, there it is, there it is. Now I know. You know what? When I say I know, see, the conjured self still recognizes that there could still be knowing, and there could still be recognition, but it's not a particular specific recognition to say that, well, you should listen to me because here's my advice for you. No, there is no advice to give. There's nothing to sell. There's nothing. There's nothing to buy, sell, or trade. It's freely available. Awake to being awake, aware to being aware. Coalescing, blending, immersed, the immersioning. It's just like the glass of milk. It's just all immersed. It's just like light and darkness. It's one. It's one and the same, except it's just apparently appears to be light over there and shining, and then there's a little bit of darkness and shadow over here, and then there's different gradations. So science steps in and says, wait a minute, we got to measure that. We got to measure that. The double slit experiment, yeah, why does it do that? Why does it do that? See, they're not acknowledging or recognizing. They can't recognize it yet because they're thinking in terms of the language of science. The language of science has no answer. The final answer is Advaita Vedanta, the absolute Brahman. That's non-duality. The non-dual, you could say, perspective, but be careful with that one because you don't want to separate the non-duality message, Advaita Vedanta, and say, well, there's non-duality philosophy. No, 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 no. You know, it tries to see. It tries. It can't help itself because it still has that habit. The self-conjured self. The conjured self still wants to conjure, to think in terms of, wait a minute, this is my idea. I thought of it. What if it could be a philosophy? And so it starts again. Guess what? The collapse stops then. The collapse and the falling away that it seemingly happened stops again. Why? Why would it stop again? Because it's an energy. It's type of an energy. Think of in terms of an energetic field. It's an energetic field of awareness, of consciousness, one could say. So the awareness of the consciousness on particular, and then the conscious self's going to try to grab that and turn it into a subjectively say, well, then there's levels, right? There's levels to the fault. No, it could appear to be levels, but there are no particulars. Remember, there's no specifics. It's just apparent appearance of a collapse. It's not particular in any particular level. Yeah, but I want to achieve that higher levels. When these spiritual teachers, when they focus on a particular type of spiritual teaching or a particular type of meditative practice, and they say, well, try this one. This one might work. Innumerable ones. There are innumerable ones that are conjured. Because why? The conjured self loves doings, activity. It wants to keep itself busy because it believes it is being busy itself. And then it wants to know something because it believes it's a separate knower to know it. I need to store that in my knowledge base, just like a computer, alive. Let's say it's like an alive computer or an android, observing what it thinks is an environment. Here's where we get into the Matrix and the holographic universe and that kind of thing. There's an author by the name of Michael Talbert. Who is Michael Talbert? Well, that's another birth name and birthright. See, notice the separation. Every single body mind action figure claims to have their own name because it's on their birth certificate. Everybody has a birth certificate, and that's what reinforces separation. It's not a bad thing. It's not right or wrong. There is nothing exclusively right, and there's nothing exclusively wrong. It's both. It's always, always is. It is right and wrong in innumerable ways, without measure.
Mhm.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
is no beginning and no ending to anything. It just is and is not. Yeah,
Like there's nothing to lose, there's nothing to gain.
indeed. It's kind of a win-win situation. You want to look at it that way. Everybody's a winner, in other words,
Mm.
and nobody's a loser either. There is no separate group of losers on the planet, like as though there's an alien race, and another Earth-like planet, and looking upon the planet somehow in some way, and then checking out the species, and then there's the prime directive: do not interfere with a race on a planet that's evolving, because the moment we interfere, what's going to happen? It's going to disrupt. It's going to disrupt some kind of appearance of. Oh, bless! I heard a little puppy barking.
Yeah, just a second.
You see, that's why the conjured self loves dogs, because it's man's best friend, and also it's recognizing the innocence and the unconditional love of the animal. Oh, they're so adorable. Look at just adorable little face.
Yeah.
Hello, puppy. Yeah, don't look at me like that. Where's my food? Fill my bowl. Does my bowl have food? Fill it. Yeah. Where's my water? Do I have plenty of water to drink and plenty of food? You see, it's no different than a human appearance of a baby. That's why it's so appealing. That's why it looks so cute and adorable, because that's unconditional love right there expressing. That's the absolute expressing unconditional love. But it's so much stronger with the what we refer to as canines, man's best friend, the dog. And then you have the cat that's a bit more independent. It's in fact it's a lot more independent.
Yes. Mhm.
So that says a lot for the conjured self that either owns a dog or a cat. Because a cat, all it cares about, feed me. That's it. You gonna feed me? I might rub against you because I want food. See? But with a dog, it doesn't care if you feed it or not. It would like to. It would like to. It'll do a trick for you. It'll shake. Teach it to shake the paw and that kind of thing. And that's the reward, the kibble. Yeah. So so you see, it's no different than a conjured self recognizing that, and then with their religions, religions. There's so many different denominations, especially where this action figure grew up in the states in Texas. And although this action figure, see, I almost said it. I almost said I was born. No, they almost said it. Why? Because it's trying to move a little bit, but it's being suspended because of the conversation. The conversation is having. You see. So if I start focusing on this, the story of this body mind, then it's going to start going back to that.
Mhm.
See, there is no body that has a life of their own. It just appears to be a reference of a life I had in the past. I can go see when it starts saying that. Well, I could go to my mom's house and she can show me the family albums, the pictures she took when I was younger. So you see, there's that self-identification. You're still identifying, and you still have memory. This body mind action figure still has memory of the past, and it still looks forward to the future. And then if it's overlooking the now, the presence, awake to being awake, always constantly available, then it suspends a little bit. The falling away, the collapse. It kind of suspends, and then it starts going into the story of its life, of its past life, and it's going to go through the story of its wants and needs and desires of the future. See, and then it stops right there. And then if it continues to entertain that, then that's where it'll go. Apparently, the energy, the energetic movement, the energetic movement gets suspended if the moment it starts referring to itself as a separate narrator of its own life, because it will. It has memory. Now, where does the memory come from? A brain, a mind that it believes is its own. See? And then it starts thinking in terms of, wait a minute, this is my mind, it's my body. And then, see, it starts going that way again, and then it's suspended. It's locked. It's kind of locked in place. That energetic, free energetic flow, the collapse, and continuing. Does that continue on even further? Of course it can. It might. It might appear, but you can't really gauge it. You can't gauge it like a rain gauge. It rains one day, and you got a rain gauge there, and it's collecting precipitation, and then we give it a measurement. The meteorologist does. I mean, that's just one example of so many other analogies. There are innumerable analogies and
Mhm.
descriptors and descriptions and the pointing. Can anybody point to everywhere? Can anybody point to everywhere in this? No, it's impossible. Why? Because there's no separate pointer. Yeah, there's no separate pointer pointing everywhere. It
Yeah,
just apparently appears to be that way. Yeah,
like there's this perpetual stuff about free will and predestiny, whatever. I It's kind of like usually I hear questions about there's no doer, there's no
that's right.
murderer trying to murder somebody or thief
Yeah,
or
that's right.
how I don't know
It's
how
taking
people.
responsibility. That's how. We could try to use the English language, try to make sense of this, right? Making sense of things is fine. Now, if there was a fire in your house, what are you going to do? Say, oh, there's no house, there's no fire, right? Of course not. It still goes on. Yeah, you better put out that fire because, hey, that's your house. You don't want it to burn up. You better find some water. Yeah, extinguish it. No, see, so this is not what we're saying. We're not saying that. Now I see myself as a non-person. You know, I don't really exist anymore. No, it's not like that. Because then, what it's trying to do is saying it's going to start focus on what is unobservable, what is unreal. Yeah, it's going to start focusing on that instead to think and believe that that's the answer. Just as it was doing with the sonus, and it's going to start focusing on not sonus. Okay, so if I focus on not sonus and I just forget all the sonus, then that's the answer, right? No, no. The final unspoken yes is this: always, always, everything and no thing, inseparably so and not so, so and not so, so and not so, always, always, like the glass of milk. It's always coalescing in the activity of coalescing, energetic movements, free, boundless, timeless. We're comprised of that. We're we're in space and time, but we're not of it. From nowhere, out of nothing. That's everything. That's the absolute. That's infinitudinal complexification. But to try to provide the example and show it in terms of visualizing, because the moment that this is explained in a language, the conjured self's going to see with eyes that believes or eyes of its own, because it still believes it's a separate believer and a separate knower and a separate doer, a separate seer. No, there's just the activity of seeing that never stops. It never ends. The activity, the energetic, just as the energetic principle of energy that we all are, and then the scientist still tries to go. Wait, we can measure that. We can measure that. Measure that. No, you can't. Can you measure a radio wave? Well, we can observe it, but yeah, that's true. You can't really measure, can you? See, so then there's various ways to address this to the scientist, to science, and this is why it's merging. In the historical accounts, the story of Earth, I don't think we've seen that before, where metaphysics and science is merging and getting together with the absolute, with Brahman. I mean, it's part of it, part of all it, all always, always. but we're seeing almost apparent appearance of a merge. It's as though that, oh, wow, a new day has dawned now. No, it just apparent appears to be something that's new. There's nothing exclusively old, and there's nothing exclusively new. This is why in 2022, 23, and all the years, by the way, everybody, every conjured self is in agreement that we have a calendar. Why? Because everybody believes that we're in space and time, but permanently. So you see, here's where the idea of separation comes in. Here is a society on a planet, an Earth like planet, and then there's the infinite universe and billions and billions of other Earth like planets in the infinite universe. But nobody knows that. Why? Because there's no separate knower that knows that. See? See how it spins? And the Gita refers to billions and billions of planetary bodies and abodes, and it is going into so much information because the information never ends. The availability, it's just as speech can go on and on and on, and transmissions like the radio. I'll give you an example. The radio waves, the transmissions of the Voyager, they're sending it out. And as it continues to go further and further out, it's still in the transmissions, but as it goes further out in time, as the idea of a continuum, when it first was launched, then the transmissions of the radio waves that were being emitted from the Earth were there, let's say in the 1940s, or when the first radio stations with, it was around the time when War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells came out. And by the way, a lot of people, a lot of conjured selves believed that that was real. See, there's an example. They were running around in a panic thinking that green Martians were going to invade. It was just a story that was told on the radio, right? But see, the conjured self only believes in permanency, on what's real and what it hears, because it believes it's a separate hearer. So it's hearing a story and believing it's true. And so those conjured selves are so steeped in beliefs and knowings, they were fooled, not on purpose. They were innocent to it. They were listening to a radio broadcast of a transmission, and then a majority of them agreed that that's what it was. Martians invading the Earth. So you see, that's how the conjured self gets together in groups. And it loves clubs, it loves groups. The reason why it loves and desires them so much, because it can support their individuality. It can support the idea of separateness. It can support terminal uniqueness. Well, I belong to this club now. Now I feel like I belong. See, it always wants to feel like it belongs to a specific, particular group. It doesn't have to feel that way because it's overlooking what? It's overlooking the absolute. It's overlooking everything that's always, always. It's overlooking that. It's not its fault. No one's to blame here. Nobody's to blame. It's nobody's fault. Yeah? Why? Yeah? Easy answer on that one, yeah? Should be by now.
Yeah.
If not, self inquiry.
Yeah, the last question is like, I this I always, from experience, it's like those who got the shift, they said there's no more fear, there's no more worry. How about you? How about this conjured? How about with Richard? Do you still
The
have
light's too
fear?
bright. Sunlight's too bright, isn't it? Lighty. There we go. Got some internal lighting. Sorry about that. What were you trying to say there?
Like many non-dualists would say there's no more fear, there's no more worry. Like
Oh. There is no non-dualist, no separate non-dualist either. So, and there's no separate worry to worry about anything. There's no separation. Remember, so nobody is worrying about anything. There is no separation. There are no particular non-dual speakers that are going to be. Oh, okay. See that novelty. The conjure self's going to apply. See the application, novelty, because it still has yet. It reached a certain point, but not really a point that can be measured. But that collapse suspends the moment that it starts believing in my favorite non-duality speaker, it starts thinking in terms of, well, I'm going to go listen to Tony Parsons because all the other non-duality speakers are not expressing like Tony Parsons is. So I think I'm just going to keep attending his thought songs, his spiritual retreats. Too bad I can't really do that with COVID now. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to figure out how to use Zoom. I'm going to get me a computer. I'm going to set it up so that I can participate with one of the most popular. Tony Parsons, the action figure, will even tell you himself, I'm not special. I'm not a teacher. Try it. Try asking that action figure, Tony Parsons, the birthday and birthright of Tony Parsons. By the way, Tony Parsons is just a name, right? See, there it goes. The birth certificate, yeah. Tony Parsons is not the only Tony Parsons in the entire universe. There's a lot of other action figures in Conjured cells that are named the same name. In fact, I'll give you about this action figure, this Conjured cell. There are about 3 or 4, probably more by now, 3 or 4 pages in the phone book. Now, when they used to have phone books, but when they did, there was about 3 or 4 pages. And San Antonio, Texas, is a really large, one of the top 10 largest cities in the United States. And so you look in the phone book, and then you see, well, what's in the name? Yeah, Richard Trevino's. And just because I put Ty in the middle, and say it's a middle name, doesn't make me any more special than the other Richard Trevino's, now does it? So you see where that goes? Doesn't go anywhere, but see, it's pointing to the fact that birth certificates, there's no significance with that. Is there somebody separate being born there? No. There's the apparent appearance, yes. Subjectively, we can refer to the subject. So we think we see separate objects. We think we see separate objects around. The conjured self thinks it sees separate objects around itself. But then it doesn't recognize that they are just simply objects, but they don't stand alone. Nothing stands alone. There is no separation. Nothing stands alone. No,
But
it
it's
does not.
really
Yeah.
Mhm.
See, the conjured self's trying to think, wait a minute, I need to come up with a response to what that statement he was saying. What do you mean nothing stands alone? See, it wants to try to think that something can stand alone. See, it doesn't want to hear these statements like that. Um, one without a second. Oh, there has to be a second because I see a second, something of, you know, I could see 2 or 3 items, and they each seem to be separately in their own space. By the way, there are no separate coordinates in space and time. It's only thought and believed to be, just like on a map. You know, just like on a map. Just spread out, and then we point to the geographical locations. Because why? Because what do we do? What are we doing when we have a map? We look at what are called measuring longitude and latitudinal marks, right? And then there's a little dot, and then there's the outline of the landmass. See, we're giving it names. We're going to call it something separate. Yeah, they're separate land masses, and just like Leonard, the action figure, the body mind. You know, we could say it that way. We could say, well, Leonard is recognized as not a separate individual, but it has a birth name and birthright, and it has a birth certificate. Now, if it no longer self-identifies with that, guess what? Collapse more. Yes, the falling away more and more, and so it starts expressing naturally, not excuse me, not as a habit, not as a habit that it will express a certain way. Man, I need to serve up my coffee. I haven't even served up the first cup of coffee. Usually I do. It's London time over here. It's 10:30, and usually I have my first cup at 5 a.m. Man, I'm way off today. See, so you notice that. See, the conjure still thinks, oh man, I still haven't had my cup of coffee. No, no, no. See, that still goes on,
Mhm.
but you're back here
It
in a
notices
sense.
it right. It catches it right away. It doesn't get
Yeah,
lost in the conjured self.
yeah. It notices both though. It falls
Both.
away. It notices both, but it couldn't notice both. Why? Because it was focusing on what is. See, it was leaving out to what is not. See, so there I am getting the coffee. Well, I'm also not getting the coffee because I'm not a separate I am. So you see, so it's starting to recognize that, and it recognizes both after that. So the enlightenment and whatever you want to call it, the enlightenment or the awakening, yeah, awakening, or the recognition, the falling away, the collapse, it still goes on where the conjured self has and enjoys a cup of coffee. Enjoyment goes on. That still happens. But it also recognizes there is no separate enjoyer of anything. See? But it's not going to express it all the time, constantly, until there is an energy which can seemingly only be found in the satsang. In the satsang, where two or three or more gather, is still the absolute. Just like the religious person says, where two or three gather, there's God. Where two or three or more in his name. But it's even beyond the name, because the absolute is nameless. It is said Brahman because, in a traditional sense, the guru and the very first ashram that's set up, and the guru uh, was very, very, very humble and respectful, thinking in terms of I must be respectful. And so it was thinking too serious. I mean, way too serious. But there was a time it had to appear, apparently appear somehow, this idea of Maya, and then for the Gita and the Upanishads to be written, inscribed. First, it was just a spoken language. It was an energy, free flowing energy was captured. Free flowing energy was captured by the Sanskrit language. Then it was spoken among what apparently appeared to be separate bodies with separate families. A separation is not bad. It's just Maya was already there. It was already set up. This particular planet was already set up this way. Now, although there may be billions and billions of other Earth-like planets, and they might be well, way in advanced, just as advanced as we are to an ant hill. You know, the insects. We have no clue imagining the self being an ant or some other living, creature. Yeah. So the chatter of the conjured self using any language, German, French, English, any language on this planet, the chatter is no different than bird song in the morning, or your pet dog barking, or your pet cat meowing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that sounds crazy, doesn't it? Let's lock up that guy, Richard Titrovino. Let's lock him up because he shouldn't be let loose on society. So, some people are going to think that. That's all right. That's okay. It does, because it sounds crazy, doesn't it? It really does sound crazy, especially to the conjured self that never heard anything like this before. Wow. So, so this can't quite be it. That's right. It's not it. It's it and neither it. It's both. So whatever is identified with, it has an equivalent opposite. Now, this is duality. We can study the duality. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Non-duality police, the non-duality police aren't going to fine us. I'm sorry, that's a $500 fine. Okay, you shouldn't be talking like that. There's no non-duality police going to go around and say you're not allowed to speak that way. Freedom of speech. That's a good thing, but it's not exclusively good, because freedom of speech can cause trouble for the conjured self as well. So you see, it's both. It's good and it's not. So anything, any idea, any subjective thought that is extracted from what is thought to be a separate object to discuss and talk about and refer to in any language, the moment it focuses on just what seemingly is about it, but leaves out the opposite, well then, what is that? That's duality. You can't leave out the opposite of anything that apparently appears to be. See? Because it is and it's not. It's both. Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah. It's really fun having this conversation. Thank you, Richard, and
Okay.
thank you to the viewers too.
Okay. We can go on and on and on and on and on for hours, but we got to give people a chance out there. We got to give the conjure self a chance to digest this. It's because this could be a lot for them to take. So, keeping it, within a certain amount of time. It does take the conjure stuff a long time to unravel, so to speak, unravel and collapse and falling away. But repetition is good. Any non-duality speaker, any neo-Advaitin, take your pick. Any of them are speaking of this. There are many websites to visit. There are many recordings and videos. You don't have to go to any exclusive one to think, well, I'm going to get the best out of it. I want the raw non-duality. Well, guess what? Sorry, it's not going to be that way because we cannot segregate non-duality as well because it's inseparable. Non-duality is inseparable. Now we can study about what we're not. What are we not? We're not duality. We're not. We don't have a dual nature. See, when we say we in the agreements, but thinking in terms of the societal structure, there never was a societal structure. There's always been the idea, and there will continue to be the idea of a societal structure. Yeah, there will be continue to be an idea of me and you are there, and I'm here. See, separate coordinates of space and time. That's going to continue to go on until the unraveling, where it's recognized that both is happening, not just here, but it's also including there, which is what every awareness. Yes, there are no separate coordinates anywhere to be found. It just apparently appears to be that I'm here in this chair and you're there in this chair, and that we have a birth name and birthright. We have a birth certificate that goes on. Still, I still respond to Richard and my parents. My mom calls me Richard. See, I respond because hey, I believe that's my name. I've always believed that's my name. Nothing wrong with that. But also at the same time, what else is going on? Well, it's recognizing, right? It really wasn't born and it won't die and all the rest of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, before I end it, like, what about the conjured self who wants to go to Richard songs? Do you have non-duality Zoom every week or Facebook groups or how about?
Yeah, we're trying to get one going. Um, our action figures are already going on the fourth one after this is done here. This particular interview at 12 noon London time. So I try to share the Zoom codes with those that might be interested. And it's already apparently appearing to happen where, uh, based on these type of interviews, a conjured self is telling another conjured self, and then another, and another. And it's like the domino effect apparently appearing to happen where one person finds out, then that's the way it works. It seems to be a type of exposure.
Mhm.
Because how do you notice this message if you don't see it happening, apparently happening in time? So we have these references. Without time, there wouldn't be this exchange apparently appearing to happen right now. Although this really is not a separate happening. Because there's other happenings that might be happening in other places. See, we're going to start getting another paradox here if we continue. You know, there are no separate happenings happening elsewhere. There are no other places. But when the body mind action figure begins to move about in its environment that it believes its own environment, then it continues on that way. There's nothing wrong with that. Either if it could not recognize both, that it is and it is not, then it wouldn't be able to recognize absolutely nothing. And then there wouldn't be any recognition whatsoever. But that too is true, whereby the apparent appearance of the conjured self is when a parent appears to be born, it's appearing. Then it'll disappear apparently when it dies, and it's no longer visible in a mirror, you know, and it'll apparently appear to be the entropy still happens to age. It'll still age and continue to change its appearance. Is it doing it on its own? No, it's a default position. It's automatic. It's an automated appearance. Whatever arises, it's going to arise, just as it simply is and is not. So it is and is not. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for your time today, and I'll see you soon.
Yes, yes, we have our satsangs, the Conjure Self, every Sunday, London time, starts at 12 noon, and it's been ending at 5, but we may make it shorter so that it's more digestible. Maybe it's too long for 5 hours to carry this on, especially if it's so much for the Conjure Self to take if it's never heard this message before. So, hey, if it takes some time to know, because everything does apparently appear to take time to do something and to know something. It's the way it apparently appears to be. But that's all right too.
Yes.
That's okay. It's all right. Well, okay. That's all right. But yeah, it's free. We never ever even imply to say that. See, I could easily put up, one of those PayPal type of things on my website. I've never done it. Never will, because it's just free information. Just as there's freedoming everywhere, and the everywhereness is freedoming. And the moment that the monetary value, there's nothing wrong with it, but the moment that that happens, it's kind of creating a type of a obstruction with what already is free to express freely. There shouldn't be a charge for that. Besides, the conjure self's already paying for its internet connection. Oh, it's crazy, isn't it? Okay. Well, I enjoyed the interview as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.